What would you do if the most prestigious professor in the country looked down on you before you even spoke, laughed at your presence, and assumed you had no right to be there? Preston Davis, 10 years old black boy, stepped cautiously into the grand hall of Northwestern University, the polished marble floors reflecting the chandeliers above like a world he had never been allowed to touch. Dr. Richard Caldwell glared at him from the front row of judges, his lips pressing together in disbelief that a small black boy from the south side of Chicago had dared to enter a competition that even seasoned mathematicians feared. The room buzzed with whispers, some mocking, some curious, as every student, parent, and professor turned to watch Preston, the boy who had scored the highest in regional qualifiers, his confidence quietly radiating despite his fear. Cameras lined the walls, recording every hesitant step, every glance of doubt, as Preston adjusted his superhero backpack, the weight of 2 years of research, 17 filled notebooks, and his grandmother Ruby's unwavering faith pressing on him at once. The professors whispered among themselves, some calling security, some shaking their heads, but Preston kept his eyes steady on the registration table, placing his hand lightly on the papers, and said politely, "I am here to compete." Laughter erupted from the room, rich white faces sneering at the idea that someone like him could challenge decades of debate and scholarship. Caldwell's Rolex glinted as he leaned forward, gripping the edge of his desk, a storm of pride, disbelief, and prejudice warring within him. Preston, unshaken, opened his tattered notebook and spoke softly, "I studied the Caldwell-Morrison debate. I think I found something missing." The room fell silent, every whisper cut off by the audacity of a 10-year-old boy claiming to have insight into argument that had divided the mathematics world. His cousin TJ stood protectively behind him, fists clenched, eyes scanning for threats, while his grandmother Ruby held his hand, whispering words of courage he had heard every day since his mother passed. Preston's small voice continued, calm but steady, explaining his approach, and for the first time, a flicker of curiosity passed over Caldwell's face, mixed with fear that he had underestimated the boy entirely. If you want to see what Preston does next that leaves Dr. Caldwell speechless and the entire mathematics community shocked, make sure to subscribe and comment, Math Genius, because the courage of the underestimated is about to be revealed. Preston Davis stood firm as every eye in the grand hall of Northwestern University turned toward him, the polished floors reflecting the harsh chandeliers above like a spotlight on his small frame. Dr. Richard Caldwell leaned forward, his fingers tapping the polished wood of the judge's desk, a storm of pride, fear, and prejudice battling across his face as he processed that a black schoolboy had dared to challenge decades of scholarship. Preston opened his tattered notebook slowly, flipping to the page where he had painstakingly written the missing constraint in the Caldwell-Morrison debate, and spoke clearly, "I believe the network can be optimized further because of this hidden variable here, which was overlooked by both sides for 32 years. The room froze, whispers turning into murmurs, some skeptical, some shocked, as professors, parents, and students struggled to believe what they were hearing, and cameras captured every hesitant gesture, every flicker of doubt and curiosity. Caldwell's lips pressed tight, his hand hovering over his pen as he leaned back slightly, a flicker of fear in his eyes because for the first time, someone, a mere child, had seen what he and his colleagues had missed for decades. Preston continued, explaining step by step, in language precise yet simple enough to follow, how he had analyzed the past papers, isolated inconsistencies, and tested scenarios in his 17 notebooks, his voice steady despite the weight of 2 years of research and the oppressive silence of the hall. TJ-16 stood protectively behind him, fists clenched, while Ruby Davis held Preston's other hand, whispering, "Remember, baby, your courage is bigger than their disbelief." Some professors shifted uncomfortably, their egos threatened, while others leaned forward, curiosity piqued by the clarity and intelligence radiating from someone they had dismissed as too small, too inexperienced, too unimportant to matter. Caldwell's face darkened, pride and panic warring, as he realized that this child had not only understood the debate, but had discovered the missing link that had eluded generations of mathematicians. Preston looked up at him calmly, eyes steady, and added softly, "I'm not doing this to prove myself. I'm doing it to find the truth, because truth doesn't care about age, race, or status." The hall was silent, except for the faint scribble of pens and clicks of cameras, capturing a moment that would soon go viral, a moment where courage, intelligence, and determination overcame prejudice. Even in the face of centuries of assumed superiority, Preston stood unshaken, showing that brilliance can come from anywhere, and the underestimated can astonish the world. If you want to see what Preston does next that leaves Dr. Caldwell completely frozen and every mathematician speechless, make sure to subscribe and comment Underdog Power, because the next moment will redefine courage and genius. Preston Davis stayed calm as the Grand Hall of Northwestern University held its collective breath. Every camera, every whisper, every gaze locked on him like he was the center of the universe. Dr. Richard Caldwell clenched his hands on the polished desk, the pride and panic in his chest battling each other as he realized a child had uncovered what he had spent 32 years trying to prove. Preston opened his tattered notebook further, flipping to the calculations where he had detailed the hidden constraint, his small fingers tracing the numbers like a conductor leading a symphony, and explained clearly how he had verified every possibility, accounted for every variable, and logically solved the problem that had humiliated generations of mathematicians. The room was frozen, even the older professors who had dismissed him moments ago now leaning forward, incredulous, some mouths open, some gripping pens for support, while whispers of disbelief spread like wildfire through the audience. Caldwell's face tightened, his jaw rigid, his mind racing through decades of papers, lectures, and debates, realizing this boy had not only understood, but outmatched the work he had defended for so long, and a cold sweat ran down his back as he glimpsed the possibility that his legacy could be rewritten by a 10-year-old from the South Side. Preston's voice remained steady, filled with humility and quiet authority. "I'm not here to win or to humiliate anyone. I only want to show the truth. Age, background, or race cannot change facts." TJ, 16, stood protectively behind him, fists unclenching slightly as he watched his cousin handle the room like a seasoned scholar, while Ruby Davis held his other hand, tears glinting in her eyes, proud and fearful at the same time. Some judges whispered urgently to each other, others tried to mask the astonishment on their faces, and Caldwell's fingers twitched involuntarily over the papers as he struggled to reconcile his ego with the undeniable brilliance of the child. Cameras captured every micro-expression, every bead of sweat, every blink of shock, as the hall seemed to shrink around Preston, emphasizing the magnitude of what he had just revealed. The silence stretched, almost unbearable, until Caldwell finally exhaled, his icy composure cracking slightly, a flicker of admiration crossing his features despite the deep sting of his own underestimation. Preston smiled faintly, aware of the power of what he had done, but more focused on the integrity of truth, the moment of vindication, and the lesson that courage and intelligence often reside where least expected. The audience felt it too, a wave of awe and respect that crossed barriers of age, race, and status, as Preston had shown them that brilliance is not determined by privilege, but by curiosity, dedication, and heart. If you want to witness the final reveal where Preston Davis changes the history of mathematics forever and leaves the world inspired, make sure to subscribe and comment "Truth Wins" to honor courage, resilience, and brilliance against all odds. Preston Davis stood at the center of the Grand Hall of Northwestern University as every eye turned toward him, the polished marble floors reflecting the afternoon sunlight streaming through tall windows, cameras clicking relentlessly, recording what no one could have imagined, a child rewriting a decades-long debate in mathematics. Dr. Richard Caldwell sat frozen in disbelief, the pride and panic in his chest warring as he realized a boy from the south side of Chicago had just solved what generations of mathematicians had failed to prove, and for the first time in his career, his name might be overshadowed by someone he had deemed unworthy of even standing in this hall. Preston opened his tattered notebook, tracing over the final calculations he had worked on for 2 years, 17 notebooks stacked behind him like silent witnesses to his dedication, and explained each step slowly, deliberately, so that the professors, students, and parents could follow, showing the hidden constraint that had eluded even the most brilliant minds, his voice steady, soft, and commanding all at once. The room, initially full of whispers and laughter, fell into a hush so deep that every heartbeat seemed to echo, the weight of history pressing on Preston's small shoulders as he continued to speak, carefully demonstrating the logic, the patterns, the reasoning that had led him to the proof, his words cutting through decades of prejudice, assumption, and dismissal like a sharp, cleansing wind. TJ-16 stood protectively behind him, fists clenched but slowly relaxing as he watched his cousin take control of the narrative, while Ruby Davis held Preston's other hand, tears glinting in the sunlight, whispering, "Baby, they're going to see you for who you really are." And Preston nodded slightly, not because he needed encouragement, but because he felt the magnitude of what was happening, the responsibility to carry truth where others had failed. Dr. Caldwell's icy gaze softened imperceptibly as he realized the implications. For 32 years, he had defended a position built on the assumption that no one, especially not a 10-year-old black boy from the ghetto, could challenge him. And now, the boy was not only challenging him, but demonstrating clarity, intelligence, and integrity far beyond what many adults had ever shown. Cameras captured the subtle flicker in Caldwell's eyes, the tension breaking slightly as he leaned forward, finally listening with genuine curiosity instead of the habitual superiority he had wielded for decades, while Preston continued, calmly yet passionately, reminding the audience that his pursuit was never about fame, recognition, or revenge. It was about truth, and that truth transcends age, race, and social status. The murmurs in the hall turned into gasps, then into applause, as the reality of what they were witnessing sank in. A child had just solved the Caldwell-Morrison problem, ending a 32-year debate and rewriting the history books. Preston closed his notebook, looked at Dr. Caldwell, and said softly but firmly, "Sir, I'm not doing this to humiliate anyone. I'm doing this because it's right. Being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing it anyway." Caldwell's face, a mask of decades-long authority, cracked with emotion. For a moment, the room froze as the professor extended his hand, and Preston, with humility and courage, shook it, small hand in large, symbolic of a world recognizing talent wherever it emerges. The award ceremony followed, Preston holding a trophy nearly as big as he was, the announcer declaring the solution effective immediately as the Davis proof, his name forever linked to a problem that had humiliated and obsessed mathematicians for over 30 years. While cameras captured his laughter, pure and free, the sound of triumph untainted by pride, echoing the lesson that perseverance, intelligence, and courage cannot be silenced by doubt or discrimination. TJ threw an arm around Preston's shoulders. Ruby hugged him tightly, sobbing in joy as Preston, still 10, looked toward the horizon outside the windows, imagining the next challenge, the next problem to solve, and reminded everyone watching that brilliance can come from anywhere, that underestimation is the enemy of truth, and that the world will always catch up to those who refuse to be ignored. If you're inspired by Preston Davis, subscribe and comment, never give up, because this story proves that courage, intelligence, and integrity can overcome prejudice, and sometimes the smallest voices can change the world. The lesson was clear. Never let society's assumptions define your worth. Never let fear paralyze your pursuit of truth, and always remember that brilliance shines brightest when it's underestimated, because the world underestimates those who are willing to be both fearless and humble, determined and compassionate, proving that courage and perseverance will always triumph in the end.